Good morning. This is your host, Christy Slaughter, on Super Talk Saturday mornings, WFHG 92.9. I'm joined with my special guest, Jeffrey Clayton. He is the Executive Director of the American Bail Coalition. And this morning we're talking about bail reform. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Jeffrey Clayton, would you prefer that I call you Jeff or Jeffrey?
I usually go by Jeff.
Okay, perfect. Well, Jeff, when I looked at your background information, your bio, you have an extensive educational background as well as professional background in bail reform. Tell our listeners a little bit about what you've been involved in and where you're currently working as far as bail reform is concerned.
Exactly. So for the last 5 years, I've worked on bail reform, and even probably more like the last 10 years when I was with the state courts. Right now, there's a movement in the country to eliminate bail, essentially, to change the way we do bail by taking the requirement that somebody has to post bail out of the system. And so that's what we're chasing around the country right now. Really, it gained steam when former Attorney General Eric Holder put a lot of funding into it and put a lot of effort into taking out not only the private bail bondsman, but the idea that a judge could ever require somebody to post bail in order to get out of jail.
Now, Jeff, you were the policy director in 2015. You've worked in many different capacities with government relations, and you're also a licensed attorney as well. So I'm sure you get to see it from several different perspectives and several different views. What are some of the problems that could possibly be associated with bail reform?
Well, I think there's bipartisan reasons not to go in this direction. On the sort of public safety side, you're allowing people sort of a free pass. You're not having any incentives for them to come to court, and as they say, there's no skin in the game for these defendants to get a free bail. On the other side, if judges don't have the ability to require somebody to post bail, the alternative is they either leave them in jail or they go to all this correctional technology, meaning GPS monitors, ankle monitors, blood chemistry monitors, drug screening, and all that. So from one of the reasons I decided to do this is because from a perspective of civil liberties, I think bail is important to have in the system, and to take it out, to me, would cause the system to go, into a state of unbalance, basically.
Jeff, what are some of the states that currently have adopted this movement, and do you suspect that more states are going to be doing this, or what's your view about that?
Well, we sort of feel like 2017, 2018 has been the crescendo of this, what the other side calls the third generation of bail reform in America. Two states really come in, New Jersey and New Mexico, by changing their constitutions to eliminate the right to bail. Most other places, and in the jurisdictions that you cover, Tennessee and Virginia, there really hasn't been that strong of a movement to completely eliminate bail, but just to look at some of these low-level cases like nuisance crimes, public urination, et cetera, and looking at whether we need bail in some of those cases. So I feel like as we talk right now, I think the movement is waning a little bit compared to sort of the activity that we saw when Barack Obama and Eric Holder were in charge.
Jeff, before the interview, I was working with coordinating having you on, and the person who represents you, your PR contact, sent some examples in New Jersey and some other places, I think maybe San Francisco, some events that have occurred that really highlight some of the potential problems. Can you talk to us some about that, maybe if our listeners aren't familiar with the ideas of bail reform?
Absolutely, and that's one component I probably should have mentioned, is that in this era of apps and iPhones and all this sort of thing, now many people think we can use a computer algorithm to decide who gets out of jail and who doesn't, and that's been the linchpin of this current generation of bail reform. And of course, we saw in New Jersey, the algorithm counted a guy who was a prior felon in possession of a firearm as low risk, and he was released, and you'll be surprised to hear he got another firearm and shot a guy 22 times. Same thing in San Francisco, another prior felon in possession of firearms counted as low risk, and we've seen all kinds of crazy cases, low-risk sex offenders and all this sort of thing where, it just doesn't pass the common sense test. And so that's another angle of bail reform that I think, not only does the public need to know about, but needs to continue to put scrutiny upon.
Jeff, it looks like from your biography that you have worked extensively with the Colorado State Courts and the probation departments, the Department of Labor, the Department of Employment and the Department of Transportation. Now, a lot of us do not get that inside view that you have as far as the inner workings of the government and kind of where we're moving as a nation. What are some of the things that you can talk to us about, some of the maybe positive things that a lot of these issues are bringing up and changing, and then maybe some of the challenges that you see as facing our country currently?
Yeah, I think the challenge with government right now, and I'll start with that, is the bureaucracy. Once the bureaucracy is formed, it's really hard to get rid of it, and it's really hard to change it or alter it. I always tell people no government program has been created where somebody evaluating it says that it was not a success. On the other hand, I think there's a lot of innovation going on in the government, and I think that's what we need to focus on. A good friend of mine represents the Colorado Office of Information Technology and tells me all the great things that they're able to do. And so, the idea that we're going to have to wait in line for driver's licenses and license plates and government services, I think, is something that's going to change. So I think technology will really have a positive impact on the government, hopefully.
That's really interesting. That's good to hear, because I know sometimes we can tend to be critical about technology and things like that. So it's wonderful to hear something positive and how it can actually make our lives more streamlined and more focused and maybe even more accurate in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And last time I didn't have to go to the DMV, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. I don't have to stand in line for an hour, and why should I? It's 2018.
Exactly. There are so many different things that we have to question like that, and then here we are. But I was curious about something, and we are pre-recording this interview, so our phone lines are not open. Maybe we can have you back on sometime, and we can open up the phone lines for questions. We do have a few questions that have come in previously. Is there any correlation between privatizing prisons and bail bonds rising to fund cities?
Well, I think private prisons are waning. We're seeing that all over the country, and I just think that's a current trend that is probably not going to be reversed. In terms of our forfeiture revenue does fund various government programs, and so and that's important because the government has to do a lot, and when somebody fails to appear in court and the case isn't processed, that has a major cost on the entire criminal justice system at the local and state level. And so, we do provide significant revenue, and obviously all our services are no cost to the taxpayer that do fund important government programs. And around the country, it could be anything from education to offender services to legal aid and pretty much everything you can imagine.
Jeff, for our listeners, for the American population, what are some of the things that we can do? What actions can we take to, I guess, learn more about an issue such as bail reform so that we can, because I'm not even sure as far as like a political platform, how much information is really put out on things like bail reform. So how can we become more educated, and what do we need to do as American population to make sure that things are moving in a more positive direction?
Well, the first thing I would say is stop being an extremist on either side. And that's what we've seen in this country that is not working right now. You have to admit you're wrong sometimes, and you have to admit that, there might be some compromise ground. So that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is, follow both sides of the debate. You can get on the Pretrial Justice Institute's Twitter feed or Facebook and follow the articles they put out. You can get on our Twitter, Facebook, or our website, and you'll see we have a news feed. And we're constantly putting, academic papers and news articles that sort of capture, the intricacies of the issue. And, bail reform is just not a popular topic. So you don't go down to the bar and somebody says, hey, let's talk bail reform. So as you said, you do have to educate yourself. But those would be the two thoughts I have.
Okay, Jeff, if you don't mind, what website would people need to go to?
Yep, ours is AmericanBailCoalition.org, or you can find us on Facebook.
Okay, Jeff, we need to take a quick commercial break. Can you stay with us for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
We'll be back here in just a moment. This is your host, Christy Slaughter, on Super Talk Saturday Mornings, WFHG 92.9. Welcome back. This is your host, Christy Slaughter, on Super Talk Saturday Mornings, WFHG. I'm joined with my special guest, Jeff Clayton. He is the Executive Director of the American Bail Coalition. Thanks for staying with us, Jeff.
Absolutely.
During the first segment, we talked a little bit about assessing risk, and you mentioned a couple cases of low level risk, I guess the algorithm, that potentially turned out to be fatal, to be very high risk. So what is the risk assessment bias, and what issues do you see that are currently coming up because of something like risk assessment?
Well, I'd say, and thanks for asking that question. It's a really important one. The entire complexion of risk assessments of computers in criminal justice has changed in the last year. Study after study have claimed that there's racial bias. One professor says, quote unquote, baked into these. And the reason is because they're built by humans. They're built by humans using historical data. In other words, what has happened in the past, and most people would say the criminal justice system has problems anyway. Well, we're locking ourselves into that mentality. So I think that's a major problem. The other thing I think in terms of bias that we're seeing right now is that there's little transparency of these systems. In other words, you and I can't go check the math. We can't go see how they checked the criminal history and the whole idea of garbage in, garbage out. We just don't know, and they're using trade secret protections and other protections to stop people from getting behind the curtain on these algorithms. And so I think the state of affairs we have right now is we really have a black box type of system where we're just believing the science, and we really have no basis to do that. And we're making substantive judgments, outside of public view, and I think that's really a problem and something I think that we're going to see in 2018 and 2019 really heat up as an issue.
So where do we go from here? What's the solution?
Well, my solution to that would be transparency. I think every local jurisdiction that's going to use one of these has to require that they're transparent, not only to the prosecutors in the case, not only to the defendants in the case, not only to the judge in the case, to understand why we're sending this guy to prison, why he's not going to get bail, and this guy is. But also to the public to be able to check it. So that's what we're advocating for at this point. I can't say for sure that everyone is biased. I can't say for sure that everyone doesn't work. But I can say we've seen enough problems that we need some transparency and I think sunshine in the process.
So how do we go about initiating that change?
Well, we've been calling for hearings in various state capitals. We have called for hearings at the federal level to start putting a spotlight on it, and I think it's going to be a slow process, frankly. But I think the public needs to say, hey, if Facebook is out there violating our privacy rights and we've got a problem with that, we might want to look at, proprietors of risk assessments who have access to the FBI's crime files and they're making, important decisions about our life. That might be a little bit scary, and I think the public just needs to, at a certain point, say enough is enough. We need to take a look at this.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, as far as looking at individual states and their constitution, why would a state need to look at their constitution and possibly make changes, and what kind of impact would that make if the constitutions within the state are changed?
You got it. So to eliminate the no money bail system, we need to have the ability for the government to lock up whoever they want and deny what we think of as the right to bail entirely. And because right now, if you don't post bail, you stay in jail. Under the new system, that would never happen because there wouldn't be any monetary bail to hold you in jail. And so the right to bail, as we know it in this country, requires almost every state to change their constitution to allow what's called for preventative detention. And then we take the risk assessment algorithm and we decide who are these people that are not going to get bail. And that's the way we do it. And as you said, what has been the result of that? We know that New Mexico and New Jersey have changed their constitutions to do this. And what we've discovered, and we've forecasted this, it would be abused by the government. Once you get the government's power to lock people up, guess what they're going to do? They're going to lock more people up, and that's what we're seeing. New Jersey, they're filing preventative detention motions in a staggering 43% of all cases, which would be a lot of people to lock up were they to be able to win all those. And that's similar to what we've seen in the federal system, who adopted or sort of eliminated the right to bail and adopted the system in 1984. I mean, they've tripled the amount of people that they're holding pretrial under that system. So I think that's the danger, is preventative detention. And I think Justice Marshall, when the Supreme Court ruled you could do this, which nobody thought you could until 1984, said, this is a decision that will go forth without authority and come back without respect. And I think that's certainly what we've seen.
Jeff, if there's information that you want to get out to the American public, and maybe it's something that we're not aware of. You've given us a lot of information this morning. Maybe it's something that we should be asking or questioning or researching. What would you want to tell our listeners?
Well, I would say bail policies are very locally driven. And so what you need to figure out is what the practices are in your jurisdiction, because local officials generally are the policymakers in this for the most part. State legislators have some say. But you have local judges and sheriffs, and these are the detention policies. And I would start there. What are the policies in my jurisdiction? Are we holding offenders accountable? Are we maximizing the use of resources? Are we ballooning a government program? Or do we have a small program that makes sense, and all this sort of thing? So to me, it'd be local, and I would diagnose the problems locally first before I went any further than that.
Jeff, if you don't mind, again, give us your website, the website where people can find out more information. That would be great.
Absolutely. Yep, it's AmericanBailCoalition.org, and I would click the In the News tab, because that's where we have updates almost every day.
Okay, before I let you go, I'm curious. Now, you've hinted a little bit to it, but what do you think over the next couple years we're going to see about, the trend in American bail reform, and how do you think that's going to impact us as a country, even outside of just bail reform?
Well, I think the idea that we could have justice reinvestment, that we could go soft on crime and save a bunch of money and reinvest it, hasn't happened. We have an opioid epidemic crisis. We have all this stuff going on. And I think the idea that we're just going to let people skate and we're okay with people thumbing their nose at the system is going to wane. And I think we're seeing that, and partially just because of the new president, but also, even in states like California where, they've done a bunch of different changes and the public is upset. And so I think the trend towards softening the system is going to go away. I think, and you can have the twin goals of rehabilitation, with accountability. It's sort of the Reagan philosophy, trust but verify, right? And so I think that's where it's going to go. Is we're not going to, as a country, continue to let people harm other people and just simply get away with it because we feel sorry for them. That mentality, I think, is going to go away for a while.
Now, you have been, with the American Bail Coalition as a policy director since 2015. Are there future projects that you're interested in working on? Have you thought in the future maybe what you might want to do?
I've gotten that question a lot. I think I could see myself being a law professor or a professor of political science, or to work on something that would really be groundbreaking, cancer research, curing incurable diseases and that sort of thing would probably be a direction I might go in. Also a fan of skiing, so I'm actually in the ski lodge right now.
Are you really?
I might get into that industry, I enjoy horse racing as well, so that might be another possibility.
Oh, good, Jeff. We may be distantly related. I have 5 or 6 careers in this lifetime, and I'm looking for more ways to create and to play. Okay, so I have to ask, the ski lodge, where is that?
So I'm at Winter Park Resort, Colorado, and it snowed 17 inches overnight, and so I'm stuck in a lodge because the lift is down and they can't seem to get it working.
Oh my gosh, being stuck in a lodge! I think I could do that. It's cold and rainy. Of course, we are pre-recording this, but the day we're recording it, it's cold and rainy here in Southwest Virginia. So yes, yeah. Colorado sounds wonderful. Now, are you currently stationed in Colorado?
Yeah, I live in Denver. I'm a Denver native, so that's where I work from.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for being on the show and sharing your morning with us. And anytime you want to be back on, discuss any of these other subjects, I know you're well-versed in many different areas, and we just love to have you back anytime.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was great.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.